Good morning. I am presenting on behalf of the entire on-water intervention team and the consulting experts on the veterinary intervention to an injured North Atlantic right whale calf at the beginning of this year. I'm going to be focusing less on the reporting of the injury, the cause of the injury that'll be covered elsewhere. Instead, I will be focusing on the veterinary and conservation medicine aspects of this intervention. On January 8th, a North Atlantic right whale 2360, also known as the Recha, and a new calf was spotted just off the coast of Georgia. While initially nothing abnormal was noted, the post-survey assessment of images revealed an injury to the rostrum of this calf and some bleeding into the water. On January 10th, the aerial survey tracked down the same mom calf pair, found them again off Georgia. Georgia DNR also launched the vessel for further assessment, and it was found that it was indeed an injury. The rostrum wound was now a little more agape than it had been 2 days prior. And a lot of boat-based and drone-based photo documentation and airplane-based photo documentation was gathered for wound evaluation and for assessment on what to do with this case. And using this information, a subject matter expert panel was convened by NOAA. This panel was convened to bring added expertise and perspectives to the table for consideration of the management of this case. Of course, representatives from NOAA, resource managers were present, but also experts in right whale anatomy, necropsy, cetacean, emergency medicine, prior efforts and experiences with right whale sedation, and then, of course, expertise in boating, biopsying, and approaching North Atlantic right whales in the field. Quite a few hours were spent considering many things from veterinary to research management perspectives. I will leave the resource management questions to my co-authors during the Q&A, and instead I will focus on the more veterinary conservation medicine aspects of this intervention. The veterinary assessments of this case and the veterinary considerations of the case were quite extensive. A lot of information was pulled from a lot of disciplines and a lot of individuals. Historical necropsy information was tremendously valuable because it gave us insights into the type of injury, the depth, the severity, also how these wounds progress if left alone. The input from the biologists on the subjective behavioral assessment, how's mom and calf doing, indicated that the calf actually was acting surprisingly normal, diving, rubbing, and developing these maternal bonding behaviors. This also included an objective anatomical evaluation of the injury. There were injuries on both sides of the skull, but one side was considerably less severe than the other, although there's still the consideration of underlying trauma, let's say, to the skull bones. We assessed the injury to be relatively acute, so it would have occurred in the last 24 to 48 hours. Bleeding was evidence, but not in sufficient quantities to be considered life-threatening, but it did pose an interesting concern about triggering shark predation. The tissues involved were skin and full-thickness blubber, possibly extending down. The injury was possibly extending down to the skull, and importantly, there was some evidence that the baleen in one of the jaws of the animal had been exposed and potentially avulsed. So there was no good wound closure option, even if this is something we wanted to consider. Also, the wound edges were not opposed to each other, so they were moving. The wound would, so to speak, butterfly open as the animal would dive, and this movement meant that this wound would never fully heal on its own. Based on this, the assessment was that the most imminent concerns were sepsis, which is the condition where the bacteria enter the bloodstream, which inevitably leads to death. Effective nursing, is the pain and the mechanical trauma interfering with this getting milk from mom. And then chronologically after that, concerns about wound infections, purulent discharge, possibly abscess formation, but also in the long run, effective feeding. If this baleen rack was involved in the injury, would this animal ever, even if it is able to nurse from mom, would it in the long run, would it be able to forage on its own? Considering all this, considerations in favor and against intervening with this animal are listed here. Those in favor were that, this wound was not likely to resolve spontaneously. At least some of the concerns we had, some of the risks that we determined that this animal was exposed to would benefit from an intervention, specifically sepsis or wound infection. This, no doubt, was an animal of extremely high conservation value, so worth the effort. And also importantly, there was a prior intervention experience with this same species, the sedation attempts in prior years, but also less than a year before this calf. We did a similar intervention to a sick and dying southern resident killer whale calf in the Pacific Northwest. A medication delivery device with sufficient volume was available from the prior sedation work, and a lot of necessary background data, field resources, and expertise were also available for an intervention. Some of these concerns we had would have benefited from a one-time intervention, so we didn't need daily treatments. But there was the potential, because the animals are relatively traceable, there was a potential of follow-up monitoring and treatments. Considerations against intervening was, this animal had a very poor prognosis. There were some questions about, are we inflicting unnecessary impact to mom and calf? Are we prolonging suffering? If this animal is going to expire anyway, should we let this happen sooner rather than trying to prolong or supporting this animal through 2 weeks of life and then eventually expiring anyway? Also, let's say this animal does make it to weaning but can never forage on itself because of the trauma to the deformity that would result to the mouth. Would this unnecessarily prolong the intercalving interval for the derecha? If the calf dies sooner, she will more likely have the next calf sooner. And then, of course, the risks of operation. These interventions are not without risks, things like a dart remaining embedded or mom becoming entangled in the monofilament line that is attached to the dart for retrieval. In the end, NOAA did give us the green light to proceed with an intervention, and a lot of planning started happening. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into everything here in great detail, but effectively, a lot of information was pulled from historical information for right whales, from cetaceans, drug selection based on experiences with cetaceans and managed care, and an intervention team was put together, which consisted of aerial support, a support boat, an intervention boat with an experienced boat driver, an experienced marksman, system specialist, a veterinarian, and then as a person in charge of photo documentation. On January 12th, so 4 days after the first reported injury, the team started to stage, convened in Fernandina Beach, Florida. On January 13th and 14th, fog hindered the attempts to find the animals, and the animals were not located. On January 15th, we were successfully able to locate the derecha and her calf, actually pretty close to where we had staged Fernandina Beach. Prior to really sort of going headlong into the intervention, we did a in real time on water health assessment to the best of our abilities of mom and calf. And of course, the calf was still alive. The calf was with mom, which greatly improves the chances of survival. The aerial team was telling us that the body condition, at least from what they could tell, appeared stable, and that the calf was behaving normally. The boat team reported that also that the behavior appeared normal and that the wound was progressing as could be expected. After this last check-in with the incident commander, the green light again was given to proceed with the intervention. And you see us here approaching the mom and calf for the first and last time that day for the injection. The boat driver, Clay George, is getting us close to the animal here, and the pulpit, you see Jameson Smith, who is operating the PAXARM medication delivery system. You will see when the dart deploys, there's actually a line that is a tether that we use for retrieving the dart, and we leave the dart in the whale for up to 7 seconds, which actually allows it sufficient time for all the medications to discharge. So here the calf is surfacing, Clay is getting us in closer. We will be waiting for the next surfacing, and at that point you will see Jameson successfully deploy the dart into the calf. I should note here that the plane overhead here at this time is constantly notifying us of the position of mom because we weren't able to see her, and mom was on the outside of the calf. Here the dart is delivered. The dart is retrieved, which allowed us to confirm that the medication was discharged into the animal. Initially, there was very little behavioral response for the calf, actually surprisingly so, but then here at this point you will see that the swim speed does increase, does pick up, which presumably is an avoidance behavior in response to us. So all post-injection monitoring was done via drone with the boats at a distance, so we wouldn't further interfere with mom and calf. During this day, an enormous amount of photo and video was gathered that was very tremendous for the evaluation of this case. This image is the best close-up we probably got of the injury with the camera. We don't need to get into the anatomical descriptions of the injury here. Importantly, that day, on some of the frontal images that were collected via drone, we actually got confirmation that this wound indeed did penetrate into the mouth of this animal. I will zoom at the tip of the rostrum. This sort of pinkish triangle is what we presume to be the gums, but more like the tongue of this animal, which confirmed the suspicion that this was an open injury into the mouth. Even more concerning then, and further confirmation, was this image that was collected that day. This white plume that is behind this calf is not mud, but is suspected to be milk, which again confirmed that this anatomical defect was also interfering with the functional closure of the mouth. Even though we assume that this calf expired, each one of these cases presents us an opportunity for a stepwise improvement of these interventions. This intervention in 2020 was only possible because of the prior efforts and the lessons learned from them in 2009, 2011 with sedating right whales, the 2007 remote injections of the humpback whales in the Sacramento River, in the 2018 response to the sick killer whale calf. And it is important to note here that there is an effort underway to accumulate experiences across whale species for the stepwise improvement of the intervention process. Things like what medications can we use, how do we dose them, what are delivery systems, what more do we need, and then also actually starting to gather some data on do the animals actually benefit from these interventions. With all that said, I do believe that this work that is being done will be applicable and be of benefit, hopefully, for some North Atlantic right whales in the future, because North Atlantic right whales, they're individually known, they're each of high conservation value, they truly are worth this, undoubtedly are worth this effort. We know what we're treating, right? It's not an unknown cause of illness. The animals are relatively traceable. We can relatively easily find them and find them again at times. And most importantly, a lot of essential resources are in place. Aerial support, aerial detection, a lot of necropsy data, body condition scoring tools, body weights, and finally, and most importantly, I found there was a very strong willingness for the teams from different agencies to collaborate to make this happen. And with that, I would like to thank and acknowledge my co-authors that are listed on this presentations, who are the people who are in the field with me, but then also, for sure, all the experts, subject matter experts, who lended their expertise for consultation prior to this intervention. Thank you.